Welcome to Luminocity, everyone. I'm Andy Kraft.
And I'm Jordan Stevens. Thanks for joining us.
So today, Luminosity is spotlighting She Built This City, which is empowering girls and women to pursue careers in trade. And we'll get into what all that looks like. We're here with the founder and chief spark igniter of She Built This City, Demi Knight Clark. She has been in the construction industry herself for 20 plus years, working her way up to an industry executive, now owns her own consulting firm called Knight Clark Collective. She's also the head of Better.com for the Charlotte region, graduate of the Yale School of Management's Global Executive Leadership Program, triathlete, marathoner, mountain climber, and on top of all this, helps run this fantastic organization, She Built This City. So thank you for doing this with us today, Demi.
Absolutely. I don't need to speak at all from there on. That's like the employees that were in my new hire class at Better. They're like, could you humble brag a little more? That'd be great.
I could have kept going. I had to cut down the list, actually. Yeah. So I think we'd love to start by just hearing about your career and how it kind of led you through the construction industry and what kind of made you pursue that in the first place.
Sure. And I'll try to keep it brief. I know I can talk for hours. That was the beauty of going through a couple of programs of bottom lining and public speaking. But yeah, I mean, you said it. I was 20 plus years, 20 plus or minus. When you get past 20, it's like you stop counting at that age.
Right.
I started in 2003. I onboarded in a traditionally female-run field of sales and marketing and knew very quickly, I was a journalism major, and I knew very quickly that I wanted to run things. I didn't want to just be in sales and marketing. That's a noble profession, by the way, if that is your choice. But I just knew that I wanted to be an operator, and I had very good male mentors. And I want to make that point here, because a lot of times it could be seen when you start a nonprofit that is to change the delta really for women and non-binary individuals. Is this a male bashing session? And it's not. I had some of the best bosses in my life and mentors to this day who are males. And they were the first ones that when I would raise my hand, I would say, I want to do this. How do I do this? And I was able to do that because I had initiative, but I was always grown up. I had a very strong grandmother who was one of the first female Marines in World War II. And wow. She was very female empowerment from day one. And so I was in a military family. We had no gender in my family. I was just as equal as my brother. And I was lucky to have that from both my mom, my dad, and all of my uncles and aunts. So I never really saw it until I really got into the workforce. And yeah, that's when I said, well, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care if men are doing that job. I just want to go do the job. And so I was put on a career path to do so. And I was able to cross-functionally learn the jobs of a superintendent. And this is residential construction, by the way, in purchasing and estimating. And that was all really as the financial downturn happened. As a young manager, I was a young mother with two little kids in the midst of the financial crisis in home building. And we had to shut down a bunch of the sections of the company and then also communities outside. So it taught me to be a really servant leader from the start of having compassion and humility. And when you're losing team members who are truly like your family, how do you react to that as a manager? How do you handle that? Not just from an HR sense, but just from a leadership sense. And then you take on those jobs. You're the only ones left, right? So we were the crew that were apparently led to turn the lights off. So what the positive of that was I got to learn all these different functions of land acquisition, land development, again, purchasing, design center. I got to run all of those shops de facto because nobody was left to run it. And so it did take kind of a downturn, and I'm consulting with people during the pandemic now, meaning just as a leadership, giving my advice, but that we're in the same types of situations. No, it's not a financial crisis. It is a crisis, however, and the best leadership lessons will come out of this. Nonprofits will come out of this. Great ideas are coming out of this. World-changing things are coming out of this to the positive. Unfortunately, I would never wish a pandemic or the hurt or loss of life to make that happen. So back then, yes, that's what it took for a female to get into the C-suite, unfortunately, was a financial crisis. And there were a few others. We lost a lot, too, of friends that are now no longer in the industry. So I was able to put myself on a management career, and then I just kept going. So I rose through the ranks of running cities and divisions and then regions. And as the farther I went, the more I was the only woman in the room. And I am a female that identifies as white. And typically there was only myself in the room. So that was even less of diversity. So yes, the gender diversity was starting to be there, but not necessarily racial diversity, et cetera. So it's about 8% to construction now that are females. They don't even really count non-binaries. So we don't even know those numbers. It's very low, I will tell you that, because it is not necessarily a safe place in terms of sharing and having diversity and inclusion discussions. And that's what we're trying to push the issue. And now that's what we do now. So, and then I'll shut up after that, is we're trying to make that delta 50% by 2030.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
amazing. That's really interesting to hear how, some of the barriers that you were up against, but also at the same time, like you said, out of a difficult situation that actually broke down some of that for you. And I'd be interested to know your take on anyone in the construction industry who might say, oh, I'd like to hire more women, or I'd like to hire more diversity, but they're not applying. What would be your response to that?
That's a really great question, Jordan. And we get that a lot. I get that personally a lot. So we're very young in terms of tenure with this organization. We started in December of last year and have really ramped up. And I think that's because of the need, not necessarily because I'm just this fabulous, savvy businesswoman in our staff. It's really because it's just such a great need. And that is a big component of it, is male allies coming forward, or male mentors, or male bosses, or leadership saying, it's not that I'm trying not to, Demi, it's not that we don't want diversity or we really don't want women. We're trying our best. Right. What are we doing wrong? And it's connecting the dots. There's a couple of different challenges there. One, is it an easy onboard? And right now, that's what we found. I rose my hand way back when, and then I stayed in the industry. Just getting in the industry is not necessarily easy. It's not something that just women are identifying either in high school or if they are college bound, or in college. There's a few construction management programs, and that's about it. But that's not the full gamut of the careers in construction. And those are typically male attended. So there's about 3% women into the construction management schools. And again, you get into the diversity play of that, and it's even less than the diversity. So that's the challenge, is when there's only a certain amount coming out of construction management schools to get the jobs. And then once you have them, how do you keep them? And I think that's the other challenge, is it has a tendency to be, I don't like to use the word intimidating because that's a bit of a dramatic word, but it's not necessarily a safe space to have the conversations. There's not a lot of protected environments like there are in other industries. Like right now, I'm in fintech, and we're an incredibly well-supported industry with women at all levels. We have diversity at all levels, and we have very strong and supportive, what we call people operations, or traditional human resources operations, that are supporting these new initiatives. And construction on the whole, there are some great companies out there that are doing it well, and they're doing even better now that they've started it. But most, it just hasn't been as big of an initiative as some of the other industries out there, and hence why you have the numbers that you do. And so now they're trying harder, but it's not as easy as just getting them on staff. You also have to support. So I look at that as, for that very first year, if that's not tribe supported in terms of representation, in terms of help and counseling, and also a lot of training on the male allyship, it's going to be tougher to retain those. You can attract them, but retaining them is the bigger challenge.
Yeah, and you mentioned that there's not a lot of women coming out of these training programs or trade schools. So there's definitely an element of education up front, right? As for children and young women looking at that as a career, right? That also has to shift too.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue into why I get this a lot from consultants or people that are in the nonprofit industry who say, like, wow, you all are trying in your mission to cover a broad spectrum. It's the kind of the life cycle of women. You're going for, we have three main categories or silos, I guess. Is Explorer Girls is, in the pandemic, we're actually finding as young as 5, but we were really originally slating 9 to 12. The middle school girls, which is the forgotten population, but also a very big sweet spot for the trades, and I'll tell you why in a second, is our Builder Girls and Builder Girls Club. And then we skip over the high school because that's well saturated. We just need to bolt on to those programs and go straight to what we just talked about, which is women at work, and actually getting the access, the onboarding, and the conversations to happen to have that direct hire right now. But really, to what you just said, the middle school and the elementary school. Middle school to me is the most important. Elementary school, neither boys nor girls are being exposed to power tools, getting out in workshops, et cetera. So we try to address that in a genderless kind of a way of saying, hey, kids in general just need to learn these skills. And the crazy part is the parents come with them and they don't know either. I couldn't tell you, I laugh about it all the time. I get more moms and dads saying like, hey, can you just teach me how to use a power driver so that I can hang up my drapes? Because they don't know how to use a power drill or power driver. And so moving into that middle school, that Builder Girls Club, why we think that's a sweet spot is because there are saturated trade high school programs, and partners like Lowe's and Generation T have been phenomenal with that. We can bolt onto those existing programs, but the challenge is feeding that system, and they're not being fed like they could be. And so that's why we chose 12 to 14-year-old girls in the middle school, because they're going through a life cycle that is just hard. Mine is now 14, but she just went through that. I had two girls who are now 14 and 16, so I've lived the middle school pain, right, of the change in life. And unfortunately, I think they get a bad rap. When we put them in construction environments and workshops, everything is neutralized, which is brilliant. It becomes about the project. It becomes about dreaming big and using power tools. Again, it becomes about the things. And then, the communication, drama, clickiness, all those things that are associated with middle school, unfortunately, and I think somewhat unfairly, we don't see that in the workshop. It's this really neutral kind of utopian space. And what that does is let them take all that other stuff out of the way so that they can focus on what do they love to do. And if we can do that and inspire that, we hope that by 8th grade, they can choose in that, what they call the IGP, the individual graduation plan. I want to do something with trades in high school. And if we can get them to the high school point, they can take it from there and truly create that pipeline, whether that's towards a trade school, towards an actual 4-year degree, or going straight into the workforce. And I think the pandemic, in terms of opportunity for that, has opened up. We steer clear away from the word alternative. Instead of saying alternative options, it is just another option. So now parents are looking at other options, which is, again, we're not looking at a pandemic to allow us to have these conversations, but it's opened up a new world of opportunity for us.
Yeah. Do you think that it's gotten better in the schools? I mean, you mentioned the pandemic, but like in the past, I don't know, 5-10 years that you've seen, like, do you think people are more open to that and more open to these, again, not alternative paths, but just other opportunities? Have you noticed an improvement in the past few years?
Not in the last 2 years.
Okay.
There's this is a Generation T statistic, is 16% of secondary schools have trade programs. And that's versus when I'm dating myself, I'm 43 years old. So back when I was in middle school, that was my favorite class in 7th grade, was shop class. Industrial shop class. We had to take home ec and then industrial shop class the other half of the year. And I couldn't wait to get to that jigsaw and the router. I mean, it was just, I still have those projects, shellacked like 5,000 times. My mom's like, please take this out of my house, the shelf. But that was the most fun I had. And that helped me, years later pick a career. But it's dramatically different because of the emphasis on college in this last 2 generations. We're now seeing the school debt that they are saddled with, and it is affecting their home ownership statistics and family creation statistics, as well as, what does concern me about this pandemic is now that we're watching our kids go back to school, mine included, are going to high school, 9th and 11th grade. And unfortunately, and this is a necessity of the school system, because of virtual academies and then also the in-school, like we're on the South Carolina side where we have the choice to go back. If they are doing the in-school component and even virtual, it takes away all the electives. So we have to stick to the core classes. So this is where the trades are, again, at risk in that middle population. Right now, the world is open on the jobs because they're actually still at work. However, it declines right now because of what we have to focus on. And that's why we hope this is only a year. And that's what we're bolting on. We've kind of changed our programming because we have a space now. And then also virtual is to say, okay, how can we, instead of being in the school, we can't be in a club, and they don't even have electives right now. It's all core classes. So how do we bolt onto that and still inspire them and get them excited about a potential career in the trades? And that's an ongoing discussion right now, but we have good partners to do that with. So really, I think it's the focus on the immediate jobs, and then we've got to band around really these families, because for us it becomes more of that after school / childcare component, which is so big in general right now. And so whereas we never associated ourselves to say we wanted to be an after school program or we wanted to be a daycare, we are actually looking at, because of how it's affecting family wages, especially in the trades, parents are making choices not to work. So what we don't want is women to go get jobs and then turn right around because we can't help them. And have to leave the workforce for whatever amount of time. So that was like 4 different things at once as an answer.
No, that's all good.
Welcome to our world right now, right? Like nothing is a simple answer.
Right.
That's fascinating to hear about. Like there really is like all these layers to it and all of these different things happening right now. But I'd love to also hear what your perspective is on the future of trade. And so, there's all of these things going on that's affecting your work, but what are some of the things that you get excited about, pandemic or not, about the future in this industry?
Technology. That is it's another thing that definitely going through some of our, again, public speaking programs and really pitching to funders is you have to just give the bookends of technology with the potential of construction. So at the very infancy of girls and really women, so it crosses all 3 of those silos I talk about, we have to get into a workshop, use your hands. Sorry, I'm a very use my hands person in public speaking, but using your hands, getting out and away from a computer. So there's a component to that of, dreaming big, but then also getting back to those, what we call foundational hammer and drill skills. Because if you don't know that, it's hard to transfer that over into home building in general with construction basics of blueprint reading, et cetera. And then to have to take that leap to the technology piece. So the other side of this is by 2030, the timeframe we talked about earlier, and these girls and teenagers getting into the workforce in 10 years, they're going to be out into a very different place. We're already in an Instacart, Venmo, Amazon, Google-centric world of cloud spaces. Imagine us in 10 years, especially now because we're all virtual.
Right.
So we're going to just catapult forward with that. Home building is doing the same. It's a very antiquated, meaning residential, commercial construction, which is high-rise buildings, municipal, et cetera, roads, DOTs, that's different. They're using quite a bit of technology. They're way ahead of residential. Residential's slowly but surely getting there. In terms of 3D printing, what is the biggest problem? Lumber just doubled yesterday. So land, lumber, and labor are the 3 big ones for construction. And right now, labor is tough, although in the pandemic, it's been better because, again, people have been furloughed. Now there's a difference in jobs in terms of what's available to them. Lumber has doubled because, again, there's so much construction going on. There's less of that moving across the country with distribution. Okay. And then land is always at a premium. So, and now there's a flight out of the cities. So builders are trying to go and gobble up as much land as they can. So what can we control in that is what materials we use. And affordable housing is it's in every city. Everyone's talking about it, especially in Charlotte, right? Because the average sales price has just skyrocketed here to, I think it's like $340,000, which, what teacher or service worker can really afford that as an entry into their first home? It's just not affordable. And that's what our city officials are saying. So what 3D printing does for that is there's already companies that are focused on this, engineering firms in certain cities that have 3D printed an entire village. And it's very expensive right now. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a massive 3D printer. But imagine us 10 years from now. And it's my hope that we will be right in the heart of that. I know there's companies working on it here in Charlotte and that we will be printing affordable houses here. And our girls will be a big part of that because they've learned technology through us. So 3D printing is the other bookend, as well as drone technology, because that will help us in inspections and just Tinkercad and CAD in general. So we start with the foundational hammer and drill skills, and then we end on the other side with the technology skills that are going to change the industry.
Yeah. We talked about 3D printing a few months ago when we met, and you showed me a 3D printing lab. Are you guys going to be utilizing that?
Yep, we sure are. We've partnered with Lowe's and Avid Exchange in this pivot, right? The dreaded pivot word, but it is very true. We've all had to just do that 180. Right. No matter whether we're nonprofit, for-profit, whatever we do, we've all had to modify what we do. We were able to use our 9 3D printers for good in terms of serving the community. Apparently, we did such a good job of it that people thought we were literally a PPE, like mask company and nonprofit. Oh, wow. It was like, wait, because I said, okay, it's time to kind of slow down this project, because we did receive the United Way COVID fund along with Foundation for the Carolinas and also a grant from the Ironman Foundation to do it across the country for healthcare workers who are also Ironmans.
Oh, wow.
Which is
Congratulations.
So it was really cool to be able to connect all of those different pieces. We have to date given out 13,000 PPE 3D printed face shields. We were able to work with a couple universities along with Dremel, who is a partner of Lowe's, to come up with a really great design, better than the ones you see in the stores, quite frankly. They're medical grade, and we've been printing away. We got a laser cutter thanks to Dremel and Lowe's, and partnered up with Urban League, Avid Exchange, and so volunteers at the Urban League just cutting and cutting and cutting and assembling and boxing and putting them out the door. We did shut that operation down because Urban League had to go back to their regularly scheduled programming. They gave us a big space to do that for a couple of months during COVID. And now we're doing it from our space here, which is my house. And then we just moved into our new facility, so we're going to be transferring it over there. But we thought we could kind of wind it down, but schools have actually been our number one ask right now. So we just wound it right back up, and Lowe's was just tremendous this past week and have given us more of the PVC shield that we can cut the PVC material. So it's going to continue. My family, my daughters have gotten involved, and they're like, wow, we get to cut more elastic, or the buttonhole elastic that goes around your head. So I've put everybody to work in this family. So, but it's for a good cause. So anyway, like that's what we were originally intending. Okay, well, with our Builder Girls Club, we're going to teach doorknobs. We're going to print different components of a house to teach them how this is going to impact the industry. And then we end up printing 13,000 face shields for area Charlotte nonprofits and or organizations. So it's kind of, what are you going to do? You just make the change and serve the community how you can today.
Right. But that's part of the job, right? I'm sure you face that every day when you were in the industry, is things change, you have these obstacles that come up, and you have to learn to pivot. So even though it's not what you originally intended, I think that's probably a good opportunity for people in the program to see, hey, we got to learn to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a good learning lesson for me coming over to, I've had a lot of great guides in the nonprofit world, and I certainly don't know it all. I am schooled on a regular basis as a founder of what to do well and what to never do again. But that is one thing that I bring from my for-profit life that I've had more nonprofits ask us about, of like, what's the secret to your success or sauce or whatever they perceive as like something that they wish they could have done. Not to say that we're, this pinnacle of success. We're already, hard working on trying to do what's next. But I think that's just it. I do this in my business life of what is the challenge today? And that is a very different challenge than 3 months from now. And sometimes it's hard to divorce yourself from that 3-year plan thinking or even 1-year plan thinking. But I think in times like these, that's what gets you through it. If you're thinking past 3 months from now, we don't even know if we'll be returning to work until the end of next year. So we've kind of taken a look at that from a business perspective of like, are we talking point correctly to our employees about like, should we say XYZ date, or should we just say in the future and then work on them this quarter for what's the challenge? Is it childcare today? Is it mental health today? It's going to be a very different life that we look at next quarter. And so I try to do that with our nonprofit life. And that's how the PPE project came about, as well as our Airstream. We did the same thing where, not a new idea. There's quite a few other mobile something out there. My favorite is the Hope Vibe trucks. Yet another graduate, but they're so awesome with that. So there's so many different mobile ways of doing a for-profit or nonprofit. And so it was something I had kicked around for a while when I first started thinking about this. Is like, how cool would that be? Is to just renovate an Airstream and like knock it around and be able to take like really, it's kind of like having a Freightliner, U-liner trailer behind you. It's just something a little cooler. So I thought of it as like, oh, it's just storage. And the more I started talking about it with people, it was like, no, this is a really phenomenal idea. So we got it muraled by Sharon Dowell, who is awesome and part of the Meta project. We're talking to them about doing something in our space now with Brand the Moth. Charlotte's just such a cool, creative, community. But now we call her she because it's Power on Wheels. It was named. She's coming back from Tom Johnson Camping Center, had to get rewired because it's a 1975 Airstream. The things you don't know when you take that on, but already in demand of people want us to come to community centers, to come to YMCAs, to come to different area activities, because who knew that accessibility and mobility would be a key in the middle of COVID. So that was an early pivot back in March. I asked Lowe's, I said, hey, we can't be in the schools. The funding you gave us for a Builder Girls Club, can we use that towards an Airstream? And that's, again, I can't say enough about Lowe's. They're a phenomenal partner of ours, along with several others in the community, but they're the first ones to understand. And I know there's several other nonprofits out there who can agree that when you have to pivot like this, they say, okay, what do you think the impact's going to be? We're all for it. Let's do it. Let's go. So we're so excited to get that on the road, hopefully next month, in the next couple of weeks here.
I think that's really an incredible takeaway that because really what I think of as balance, right? Like the fact that you're coming from, a for-profit world, you're a businesswoman bringing all of that knowledge in, and at the same time admitting that you've got some nonprofit things to learn. And so you're trying to do that balance. But I think I'm not surprised to hear that so many people would be asking you these questions about what's going on, because you all have made so much progress so quickly, and you're bringing in, you're using both sides of strategy, really, like how you're operating as a nonprofit and how you're operating as you would, any of the other businesses that you're involved in. And hopefully that serves as a great segue to just really dive into, I'd love to learn more, just like why she built this city. Tell us about it, the programs you offered, just really love to open it up for you to speak to the platform as a whole.
Sure. Well, as you said when you introduced, we are an organization. She Built the City empowers women of all ages in the construction trade. So again, that's pretty all-encompassing in terms of a one-liner mission statement, but 9 to 12-year-olds, really, again, it could be as young as 5. And we're teaching families, well, I'll come back to that because then I go bunny trail. 9 to 12 or really 5 to 12-year-olds is that Explorer Girls, where we're doing 1 to 2 day workshops. We're doing small play activities that aren't too overwhelming to teach them foundational hammer and drill skills, and just really getting things in their hands that might have been perceived or perceived as forbidden, like a spray paint can. I mean, who knew until we started doing workshops that parents were like, what parent lets their kid go out into the yard and say, here's a can of spray paint? That's just disastrous. Right. So we can do that in a controlled environment and say, hey, go explore, paint your iPhone stand that you just built, whatever color you want. Who cares if it's 18 colors? And it's crazy what they come up with. We don't have rules like that. We teach them how to do the basics, and then we let them explore past that. So that's that young age, is those foundational, smaller projects. The Builder Girls Club, we have to start with the smaller projects because that's the middle school age. Most of them, 2%, we found 2 out of every 1,000 girls, so it's less than 2%, have actually held a power drill in their hands by the age of 16 in America. So that's pretty phenomenal in terms of statistics, jarring, right? But it's not too far off from boys either. It's just this generation is way more technologically inclined, which comes with benefits to that, but it takes us way far away from that maker space.
Right.
So we have to start with the small projects, but then we're able to graduate up a little faster with them because of what they can take on in their knowledge base and just have a little more dexterity with their hands. So we take on bigger projects with them in Builder Girls Club, as well as bigger workshops. And then the plan is to have longer camps. And right now we're assessing the need, again, going into October, to say, now that we have a space, a workshop, or is it going to behoove us for the community to take on an after-school component? We really don't know about that, but we do want to serve the community. So that's a pivot. That's a discussion that's happening right now. And then Women at Work, which is skipping over that high school into the immediate way to change the statistics of employment in construction, is Women at Work Trade Circle and our trade events. So we're still doing virtual with that. We're doing podcasts. We're doing different events to have awareness. And then we're also doing things like sip and builds for National Association of Women in Construction, our Home Builders Association here. And we've got to just do partnerships with people like Goodwill Construction Skills Training Center, getting those opportunities out to women, and then also training them on what they might not know in construction basics.
So, you're working with a lot of different ages. What do you find is the biggest misconception about a career in trade? And what are you doing to kind of break down those perceived barriers?
Great question. I think wages, the stigma. I mean, it's just such a stigma to think if you don't have a college degree. We still have that. And I can use my own daughter as an example. And I know this happens everywhere, is just the sheer fact of in 8th grade, when these girls go and say, I am undecided for high school, it's just programmed into the guidance counselors to say, are you sure? Because really, you're going to miss out if you don't check that 4-year degree, because all these communications happen. And I don't think they realize how intentional it is, but the bias is real. And so my daughter, knowing me, went into that 8th grade meeting last year before COVID and said, I'm undecided. I truly am. And my mom does this. And I was sitting right there, and the guidance counselor was like, we really need to pick a 4-year degree. I just don't want you to miss out. And so the pressure is real. And again, I don't hold the guidance counselor responsible for this. It's systemic. So we have to start there of saying, if a child says this, or really it's a preteen, they know enough to know something. They're not, 5. Let them explore that and be okay with that. And again, I think the opportunity right now is because of the pandemic, and now schools are trying to reopen. We just watched UNC do it and then had to close right away just because 200 kids get COVID. We really are in a virtual scenario. And is that a full tuition year, or is that a gap year? And so what we're seeing is these college students taking a gap year and exploring some other opportunities for earning wages. And some of them are going into the field, into the trades. What we also don't understand is how wide the jobs are in terms of the spectrum. I mean, yes, I think what we think of is you think of a bricklayer, or you think of someone framing a house, or you think of someone laying floor, which is a very labor intensive part of the job. That is one aspect, but then there's also a myriad of aspects of getting into owning your own business, of getting into technology, of getting into management positions. That is not, it's not just the frontline worker. That's the hourly employee. So I think there's the stigma there too. There's just this automatic to think, well, it's a dead end job that just is this. And it's not this wide spectrum like every other industry of there's people that have, made quite a bit for themselves by doing it on their own. So heavy entrepreneurial system. And there's tons of huge companies now who have great benefits, et cetera, that again, you have no debt. You walk into a situation where you can pretty much call the shots. We see pipe fitters who are traveling, especially right now, for $400 an hour. That's as much as a tenured litigator in the law firms that you see. So yeah, it's just a lot of stigma that we have to break down.
And I talked to a few women when we were at the Goodwill Training Center, so I have a little background of their stories. But what are some of the big success stories that you've seen? Women who have been able to make a transition that maybe weren't able to early in life.
Sure. Some of the best were in my former home building days when I was with a publicly traded builder, and there were 7 of us. 7, I can count on 2 short secondhand. How many women in an entire company of, I think it was 8,000 employees at the time, 7 women in leadership. I mean, true leadership roles, vice president and above. And again, it wasn't because the company wasn't trying. It just was a harder, heavier lift to get them into those positions. So I took it upon myself. And that's what ultimately led me to start She Built the City, because I was taking it upon myself to say at least 5 to 10 women a year, I've got to invest in them. And I learned from another woman who was phenomenal. She's a mentor to this day, of one of the first female division presidents in the whole residential arena of home building in the US. And she said, you just got to feed in. You got to feed the machine with your own, pouring out of yourself as a servant leader and a mentor. And I did that. And I can look back at those ladies who now contact me 10, 15 years later and are in positions of influence themselves, whether they've started their own companies, they're in very high up C-suite jobs, and they're publicly traded or private builders. And they say, hey, it's not a thanking me, it's not like kiss the ring kind of thing. It's more of a wow, you've impacted my life and I'm doing the same. So I think that's what I love to build leaders in general. That's a gender non-specific thing. But it really, I feel like my legacy is now that with a nonprofit, we can scale that before. And that's what I was frustrated with, is I could only influence really 10 a year unless I went and publicly spoke or something. But now we can really catapult that with a lot of other people. It's not always my voice that has to be used. So and I think that's women in general. You start talking to women, we get really, really passionate. And I know you talk to a lot of the ladies of what I call NAWIC, or the National Association of Women in Construction, who are incredibly passionate, big supporters of ours. The Charlotte chapter is amazing. And you start talking to any of us, especially those of us who have perceivably made something of ourselves, right? We're in the C-suite jobs. They get very, very passionate about saying, like, there is a huge component of looking behind you and saying, or looking at the next generation rather than behind, and saying, you've got to at least throw the rope and start helping over.
And Demi, speaking of success stories, I would love to hear also what sort of a favorite story is of yours from She Built the City so far. Like one of your girls, one of the women in the program, something that really sticks out as like, yes, like that. This is why I'm getting up and doing this every day.
Yeah, and I actually went through the Seed 20 program. We were talking about that earlier, and had as part of the program, you give a 3-minute pitch, and there's definitely an emotional call. And I remember my coaches saying, like, you've got to have a good story in terms of what's happened in impact. What sticks with you, like what you're saying. And mine, that I used and I still use today, and we've seen it many times over after that, but it was really the first workshop we did, and it was where we were building planter boxes, and I was semi-terrified because I was like, I'm going in there with women and also girls as young as 7 over Christmas time. Like, are they going to be able to do this with these drills and with power tools that I'm saying this will work, but is this really going to work? My daughters are older than this. And I went in, and it was these little pipsqueak girls. I mean, teeny tiny, a couple of them, just 40 pounds wet, they're just teeny tiny and terrified of these power tools. They were more tech-based, very good on the computers. And then we went to the planter boxes, and it was like, what? Can we paint them? Do we have to build them? And so it was like, nope, you got to do this on your own. And I remember Ava was the one who she was the tiniest of them all. And not that makes any difference, but really, like, the power tool was as big as her, and the gloves weren't even fitting, so it was really this moment of watching her, like, look like a gun, and it was just wavering, and she's terrified. And I said, you got to do it. I know you can do it. I believe in you. We set it up. And she drilled that first screw with the power drill. And it was like, you just watched the transformation happen. It was real. Of like, I tell people it was like the Wonder Woman cape just grew out of her back, and her shoulders went back, her nonverbals just changed. And she was like, give me another one. She put her hands on her hips and said, give me another one. Kind of like the girl on Wall Street, right? That was looking at the bull. And that's immediately what I thought of, was like, I get it now. Like, and there were so many of those moments in that first workshop where I said, okay, like, stop being afraid of what you don't know and just go do this. Like, get this out to the world, and we'll figure it out. We'll build the plane as we fly it, but just get this out to the world. So many more, COVID kind of slowed us down there on convening, and now we're getting back to it with our workshops. So I'm very excited for those moments to come back, and then to multiply those moments.
You guys have already made so much progress in the past year. It's incredible. Yeah. Where do you see it? What's your dream for this in, let's say, 10 years?
Oh, yeah. And this is not following my own rules, right? Of past a 3-year plan. My team here knows that I have big dreams. I mean, I always, just reading my bio, you can see I'm always looking for the next summit. And when it comes into terms of this, it's an impact, less ego, more impact. So how many women and girls can we see? I see us, again, changing the world with affordable homes, as in terms of 3D printing and turning it. Once we solve that delta of the 50-50, let's take it even further, right? Of like really tackling some of the issues of keeping home building in the United States, not having to go offshore where other companies have to invest in us. We have the brain power and the technology here stateside to make it happen. So that's kind of a personal thing to keep it here and train the workers here. But then also to see this go, if not just US, worldwide, because we've already had people reaching out to us in other countries to say, hey, we need this here too. Wow. And it's like, whoa, that's a little weird.
That's so cool.
But we've got to find the right ways to scale. And right now we're doing that with organizations like our home builder associations, the National Association of Home Builders, as well as National Association of Women in Construction. And we really have to focus this year on Charlotte, because if we get our programming down and we do this well, then it's scalable. But yeah, I have to be talked down on a regular basis of like, we can't do that tomorrow. Like, that just is not going to happen tomorrow.
Wow.
Well, for the people listening though that are nodding along, like this is amazing, and these people that are so interested in what it is that you're doing, how do they get involved? Whether it's a girl participating, a volunteer, a donor, where do people find you and find out even more about your story?
Great question. You can start off at shebuiltthecity.org. It's a great place to start, or as you mentioned earlier, Andy, our very busy Instagram. We have some great social media coordinators, and then I'm in there posting on the weekend. They're kind of like, please stop, you're a little overkill, but I'm just so used to doing it. It feels like my community and I get to talk to them. But yes, very active on Instagram at shebuiltthecity and Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you're a business, we're always looking for partnerships and we're actively talking about it. In terms of the time, talent, treasure, of course we like treasure, but honestly, right now we're in a season of programming, so we're looking for time. We've been talking to a lot of companies in construction or with construction experience, at least knowing power tools, to come help us instruct and or help us on volunteer days. We're getting our space up and running. So literally this weekend, we're building workbenches with NAWIC volunteers. So there's a lot of a time component there, so don't always feel like it's got to be treasure. And then talent too, so that's a combination. So if you're just somebody who wants to learn, we've got a lot of programming coming for both parents and kids and girls. And then also for businesses, we would love to partner up and either have us build and bubbly, as we call it, or sip and builds, as our friends at Rebuilding Together call them. And then also programming in general of having work days. Let's clean up the different areas of the city. We do a lot of collaborations with other nonprofits. I think that's another thing that may or may not surprise people. That's really how I built our connections of not being in the nonprofit space. Andy watched this happen where he was like, I need to introduce you to this person. I'm like, no, I already know them. We just did a project last week, or we built them something. I think half of the Seed 20 classes have had something built for them by us because I was like throwing it at them. Not necessarily that they wanted it or needed it, but it was just a way for me to connect to people, but also feel like I was giving something of us rather than saying in what could be as a perceived ingenuine way, we should work together. Like we really wanted to prove like, no, we're here we want to create tangible results. So I love many of the collaborations that we're doing. We're going in all these different directions like adaptive reuse, landfill diversion, using things like pallets and rebuilding. We're talking to people like C3 Labs, and Lowe's is involved with that too. I mean, it's just great. I mean, I love this ecosystem of creatives. Again, it drives people crazy from a programming standpoint, especially it's hard to catch the net behind me. We have a fabulous COO in LaToya and catching the net and saying like, okay, stop. Like you just keep coming up with these ideas we need to implement. But yeah, I love being in Charlotte right now. So come help us with ideas, with your time. Again, if you'd love to donate, we'd love to have you, but really there's just so much to be done. We'd love to roll up some sleeves together.
And what about people who maybe aren't in construction or parents who haven't been exposed to it when they were younger, but they, are open to their kids and they want to encourage their kids to make this consideration? What would be a good starting point for them?
A great starting point would be virtual shop class. I'm so glad you brought that up. We're actually meeting next week to continue our programming with Lowe's. So this is with Generation T. So if you go to We Are Generation T on Facebook, you can find all of our past virtual shop classes, which was another pivot. Since we couldn't do any programming in the schools or in a workshop, Lowe's was very nice when we pitched them on saying like, hey, can we do this online? Can we do this? I was doing really shoddy videos, on Facebook pages that were very grainy, et cetera, of like, here's how to build this. And, we had some population watching it and they said, hey, let's clean this up and let's make this to a wider audience. This is of a lot of value as kids were climbing up to the ceilings with their parents in early COVID back in the spring. Right. So we did some pilot episodes. They were received tremendously well. And we took a little break over the summer and are now reconvening and we're going back to it. But all of those videos are still up and running where parents, if you just want to learn, we did 1-minute clinics on here's how to use a drill. Here's how to hammer correctly. Here's how to practice with your kids. The basics. I mean, like really, really basic. So you feel like, okay, I don't have to walk in knowing something ahead of time, even if you don't, because we'll teach you in the matter of like 10 minutes. But if you just feel like you've got to have the pre-skills, go to We Are Generation T, watch our virtual shop class. There's more episodes to come, and then sign up. Again, we don't have all of our programming on our online, but reach out to us because we have programming coming for parents and kids together. But we are hoping that, whether it's in your home, in your garage, if you're, still socially distancing and just want to try things on your own, that you can learn through a virtual format, or come and visit us and we can teach you as well.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes so people can find that. And you had mentioned a podcast. Are you guys doing podcasts as well?
Oh, it's not like this one. It is definitely, and we should probably talk about that. We're doing it through our Zoom broadcast where we used to do Women at Work trade circles where we convene, since that's not going to be, oh my goodness. We did it at the Goodwill Construction Skills Training Center, and they are such a phenomenal partner of ours, but it's just not safe for us to put, we had great turnout, so we just can't put all those people in there. It's not really allowed, and it's just not safe. I don't see us doing that for some time. So we transitioned that into going onto LinkedIn and we do 10 minutes of WOW, just so it keeps it bite-sized. We found that out when we were doing webinars to start. It was like everybody's webinared out. We are all on Zooms. Right. If you're in the workspace that, is more traditional workspace, we're definitely in Zooms all day long. So you need to get it just what's the meat and potatoes. So we went to 10 minutes of WOW with just different, and that's Women at Work WOW, with different women and male allies of just bite-sized nuggets for businesses and for people looking to get into the trades.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, we'll be sure to share that as well. Anything else? I mean, I know you have a lot going on. You're constantly pivoting and finding new ways to move this forward. Anything else that we didn't cover that you want to touch on?
That's pretty comprehensive. I think, if you've got daughters or sons, I say this to parents all the time, or if you don't even have kids, just see how you verbalize things, and how we speak to boys and girls, and how we create the differences for them, because they don't create those differences. So whether you're in the trades, whether you're not, whether you're a parent, whether you're not, just see how, like everything else with bias, how we speak. And sometimes it's as simple as that. If we change just stop saying you guys.
Right.
It's as simple as that. If you want to make basic changes in your life that help this next generation come up in the world and feel like they're all together. Look as simple as that. So that would be my final thought for the day.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate the time, and I'll be in touch when we release everything, but really do appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and really enjoyed talking with you again.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you
so
soon.
Much. Have a great day.
Okay.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah, she's awesome. I talked to her a lot several months ago it was literally, I think the day before lockdown, I went out to the Goodwill Construction Skills Training Center and I interviewed, I think it was five women who were in the construction industry that she had put me in touch with. And obviously throughout that process, I had the chance to talk with Demi several times, and she's just so passionate and so alive about this. And it's not just talking, like she's actually doing stuff.
Right. She mentioned during the interview that the way that I first learned about She Built the City was through C20. And so she was one of the participants this year. I was a coach for another nonprofit. And that same energy that she brought to today's interview, and that she's clearly just brings to all of these programs and all of her, different arms that she's of her businesses that she's doing, like that totally translated on stage. Like you can just tell she's so passionate and she has so much energy and is willing to just turn on a dime to meet people where they are. Like, okay, we were going to train with 3D printing, and right now PPE needs to be 3D printed, so that's where we're going. And I think that's really I understand her hesitation about not wanting to like humble brag, but I think that's why so many people are so impressed by her organization in the Charlotte community, is because to have started just last year and to have made so much progress and to make so many connections, I think she really is creating sort of a brilliant case study in what it means to really launch and innovate in nonprofit space in Charlotte.
Yeah. And she does come with that background in the industry, so she knows the ins and outs. And one thing that I really appreciate about Demi is how optimistic she is about the future. She acknowledges the problems like with the industry, but she's not like bitter. Like through her 20 plus years experience, and she said she had a lot of great mentors, but I feel like it probably would be easy. You're one of the only women in the room. Again, speaking as a male, I have no clue. But I imagine that, being one of the few people in that room, it would get frustrating. But she came out of it with, okay, here's a problem. How can I help fix it? And let's approach it from, young girls, women who may be later in their career, and then in these, companies themselves, how can we change it from the top down? And she's just very optimistic about the future of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And she makes her message so accessible, because I mean, the way that she ended our conversation, for it to not even be about, if you're not interested in participating in the program, if you're not interested in, necessarily picking up a power drill next week, just to be aware of our biases, being aware of some of these, gender stereotypes that we place on young women and men, and seeing that for what it is. So I feel like her message, it's being delivered through this, her background in construction and all of these great workshops and tools, but it's also so much bigger than that. And you can tell that her and her team haven't lost sight of that. So really great conversation. I'm so glad we were able to have her on today. Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I'm going to combine this with all the interviews I did, but we'll weave them in here somehow. And like she said, you can find her at shebuiltthiscity.org. Follow her on Instagram, Facebook. She posts a lot of good content. You can always see that they're innovating and always doing new stuff. So go check them out and, get involved.